Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and today we have another innovator interview. We're talking to Lauren Olson, who's the Zero Waste Manager at World Centric. World Centric is a maker of biodegradable and compostable food service materials, cups, out-to-go plates, and so forth. And welcome back to the show. You've been on before. Lauren, you wrote a great article about how to avoid revenge pollution for us last week, and I wanted to talk to you about it. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Mitch.
Well, you've been working at home, and like all of us, you're thinking about how we start to unlock, and you talk about this concept in the article of revenge pollution. Can you tell us what revenge pollution is, and let's then talk about how to avoid it?
Well, it's kind of like the uptick that we see usually after a downturn in greenhouse gas emissions or carbon emissions. So for example, like in the 2007-2008 recession, I think it was around like a 5% reduction, or 1%, sorry. And then it went up 5% by 2010 from that level. So it's kind of this concept that even if we might have a downturn, we will have later on an uptick as people get excited about taking that trip, buying that item, or otherwise doing activities which are inadvertently or very overtly harmful to the environment. And right now, I think we're looking at a 17% downturn in greenhouse gases, and it varies across the sectors. Just read a really good Nature article about that came out the other day. About the
I actually read a little extra information from Nature today, and they clarified. So they measured on April 7th and found that globally on that day it was down 17%. But they also quantified the year-long savings we've had so far as being about 7.2%. So we have made a tremendous impact. So it's important for all of us to recognize that when we all make small changes, in this case, we stop driving, we stop doing a lot of other things, including shopping and consuming so much, we can make a difference. And for a lot of folks who are concerned about sustainability, that has always been a point of contention. It sure feels like we can all get together and make massive changes in the environmental impact we have based on what we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, people talk about this, the shelter in place. I think we all were hesitant to say the word quarantine in the beginning, or lockdown, also felt a little too severe. But this era, we saw it kind of relatively change before our eyes. At the beginning of the week, it was like one way. And then by, late afternoon on a Friday, I know I got an email from our CEO that was like, bring home the monitors or anything you might need. You might not be here on Monday.
Right.
And so, I've heard other people describe it as, things could change in the afternoon. And it would be great if we could figure out how we can make these pivotal changes for climate change. I'm obviously not saying something like this in its exact form, but it just shows that we can make these changes and we can adapt to them. And it's obviously painful. In this case, I'm not saying it was incredibly great. We do have people like out of work, unable to pay their mortgages and rents. I mean, that's a severe issue, but it just shows that, we could do something altogether if we listen to scientists. And I think more than ever, this whole situation has really shown us that if we are able to listen to scientists, maybe like these climate change scientists now, we should maybe be heeding some of that advice and changing the way our economy or everyday life runs in minor or major ways that might reduce greenhouse gases.
Well, your article lays out, and by the way, folks, it's called Avoid Revenge Pollution. You can find it on Earth911. You point out a number of different things to look at. And let's start off with plastics, because, of course, that's a massive area of concern for our listeners and our readers. What should we be thinking about when we go back to using plastic the way we used to, or maybe we go forward into a new way of using plastic?
Yeah, well, something I'm very concerned about post pandemic or post this time, or as you call it, the great pause, is that, we've really had a downturn in the need for jet fuel and gasoline. I think
Mhm.
everyone's seen that at the pumps, that gas is incredibly cheap. So the thing about that is that the ethylene and all of that goes into making plastic are byproducts of the gasoline oil refinement into like gasoline and jet fuel.
Right.
And so because they need to sell these byproducts, they conveniently call them feedstocks. The plastics industry is going to be really pushing virgin plastic. And I think that it'll be difficult for some of these major corporations to economically get to maybe their stretch goals or minor goals about utilizing recycled plastic because virgin plastic will be so much cheaper. So that's very concerning to me in terms of plastics, because I think we're going to see an increase in virgin plastics in the marketplace. And I think local as well as state recycling programs are going to feel the brunt of that, because they're not going to be able to sell their plastics on the open market because people may not want them, just with virgin plastics being so cheap.
And this follows on the Chinese ban a couple of years ago, which changed the whole pattern of the recycling of plastics worldwide. So it's a great point. Now, World Centric has been developing various bioplastic products for a long time. Can we, as consumers, make a concerted effort to ask for bioplastics, and what does that add up to in terms of environmental comparisons with just regular virgin plastic when you use it?
Yeah, so we use all plastic that is made from plants, primarily corn and some sugarcane now, but mostly we use corn-based plastic. And the benefits of that is that we're not part of this whole petroleum conglomerate thing that really has so many repercussions on the environment as well as our geopolitical system. So that's one benefit, large benefit from utilizing bioplastics. But also, compostable bioplastics, they use about half of the carbon dioxide of traditional plastic. And so that's a huge benefit as well, is that you can know that in order to make the plastic, it required less carbon to do so.
Another thing that you looked at was composting. And interestingly, a lot of cities, including New York City, stopped composting services during the pause. But that'll be coming back. What else can people do to encourage composting in their community, or doing it at home? What would you suggest?
Yeah, I think everyone's kind of looking for some relief right now. I know I got more into container gardening than I ever thought I would during this time. Checking on my plants like pretty regularly.
A lot of time,
Yeah. It's just nice to be outside during the workday, take a little break. So, yeah, and it's been nice to composting. I have a little compost tumbler. And I think, during this time, if you have the extra brain activity that you're not utilizing for maybe something else, like trying to figure out how you're going to pay the bills and have that anxiety that you need to, do something with in other ways. I think a lot of people like myself are seeking therapy through gardening and composting. And it's just really nice to be able to check on something, see that it's happening, monitor it, and feel like you're kind of like doing something, I guess, rather than just kind of watching the days go by and then wondering what day it is. So I think that is a great thing for people to start, and highly encourage to get out there and get your hands in the soil.
Well, and in addition to that, you have a couple of items about travel and commuting generally. And obviously, travel is probably the most impacted element of all of our lives. And I've used this as an opportunity to rethink when and where I go everywhere. Not having to go to an office, I now look at my day completely differently. I also have 2.5 to 3 hours a day back from not having to travel. What are the impacts? Put it this way: how would you suggest somebody try to keep their driving at a lower level than it was before.
Well, I think part of the CDC recommendations were to grocery shop, every 2 weeks. And I know before this, I sometimes found myself grocery shopping a few times a week. I'd get a craving for something all day at work, and I'd be like, I'm going to go and get the ingredients for that and make that. And then the next day I might want something else. And, it just became, something that I just kept on going to the store. And so I think, the whole idea of trip chaining, that Jimmy Carter really put out there in the 70s, I think we've all gotten into that more like, okay, if I'm going to go out and kind of suit up, so to speak, wear my mask, do a bunch of things, be really cautious about washing my hands and hand sanitizer and just get all my errands done in one go. I think that will maybe be something that people can carry forward in terms of reducing the amount of surface and vehicular traffic.
Well, you also make a nice point that it's not really about where you're physically going, but it's the state of mind or the relationships that you're trying to achieve through your travel and rethinking them. As all of us who are working remotely now, you can video conference. But I also meet now with 14 different households in my extended family once a week via Zoom. And it's actually reignited a whole set of relationships that had sort of fallen by the wayside. When do you think it's worth traveling, just from your perspective today? And I know this is not something that you're prescribing for everybody, but I think everybody would benefit from hearing the kinds of judgments you're making about your travel today.
Yeah, I think there is such an emphasis on travel. And, a lot of people look to my generation, the millennial generation, as really starting that, I remember when I was in college, you just meet all these different people and they would be like, what do you like to do? I like to travel. And, I had another friend that would make fun of that all the time and say, we all like to travel. All right. That's not, but at the same time, it's like, it is so carbon rich to be able to travel. And if you want to see pristine environments, you have to understand that your whole mission to see that is to make it unpristine. And I think a lot of people, starting really with David Attenborough's Planet Earth, started to realize is that, maybe we should only just send this elite team of videographers and they should capture it. And the rest of us should just stay home. And so I know I've been, over the years reconsidering all of that travel because there's a multitude of, carbon emissions that come from that, not just from the planes themselves, but, I will probably get like a single-use beverage and make all this waste and, and I won't be at home and be able to do my waste-saving methods and all of that. So I guess, weigh the pros and cons, but maybe realize that you don't maybe have to see everything with your eyes.
Well, and that same kind of ethos extends to what we buy and what we think we need versus what we absolutely have to have. And we've all had an opportunity to step back, partly because you can't get everything anymore. Try to buy flour today, and it is almost impossible. On the other hand, I think after this all passes, there's going to be a glut of used bread machines on the market. And, because the sales of bread machines went up 650% in March and April. But that's an example of the people rushing to do things which made them feel good, but may not become lasting habits. And that's where the opportunity to rethink our consumerism, I think, pushes the boundaries of possibilities in terms of change. And what are you focusing on as you rethink your consumerism?
Well, I'm not thinking about whether things are completely work appropriate in terms of, when I put on clothes during the day. And so that's, nice because I think as a woman, it can be quite challenging having, the number of outfits needed to kind of like that are office ready versus, things that you can just look more pajama-like that you can lay around. So I think in consumption, I think loosening these whole office sort of structures and allowing people to just wear whatever they want will reduce at least clothing consumption, which is, not really talked about, but I think it's like the fashion industry is somewhere around like the fourth leading industry in terms of climate change
Yeah,
emissions.
it is.
So I think, loosening those structures and having more teleworking will go quite a long ways into people not having to, have second wardrobes that are office ready.
Yeah, interesting.
And then I probably should have wrote about that for the article, but next time.
We
And then
love to have you back.
in terms of other consumption, I think food is a big one. People maybe not having to, maybe getting less takeout and maybe making things at home. Although we do want to see you use World Centric takeoutware, but a lot of restaurants around the country are still using plastic and styrofoam. So that's a huge contributor in terms of our consumption and consumption kind of going in the wrong direction.
Well, I'll tell you, it'd be great if we could tell on Uber Eats or Grubhub or any of the delivery apps whether or not somebody was using compostable delivery materials, because that's an area that I've been very concerned about as we do increase the number of orders that are delivered to our house. Now, we were talking about trip chaining before, and one of the things that I think a lot of people are painfully missing right now are fresh fruits and vegetables. And have you thought about how you might use a CSA, a cooperative farm service, to keep stocked up on fresh vegetables and fruits during the course of the year? Have you looked into that at all?
Yeah, I've been a part of CSAs in the past, community supported agriculture. I'm not currently a part of one.
Mm-hmm.
I know for me personally, I have a hard time eating the amount of food that I normally get. And although I agree totally with the whole premise that you get, whatever is ready and available to harvest,
Mm-hmm.
I find it difficult as a single person to then plan my meals because if I have like 5 rutabagas, not that would ever happen, but something like that, you have like something unique item, it's like difficult for me to get through it. But I think, I've seen a lot more models too, where there's a dairy near me and they're doing drop off of butter and milk because they're having a hard time finding markets for that. And they're suffering because farmer markets are currently closed. So I think, these farmers that are turning to alternative models are going to see a lot of people, associating them with, they're coming out of this sort of shelter in place or having, high emotional attachment to these sort of farmers.
Now, this is my really kind of the last question here, but I want to wrap the whole picture up. And you end your article talking about how climate change is a crisis, and it's very easy to forget climate change in the midst of this more immediate feeling crisis, even though climate change is just as profoundly and more so impactful in our lives. Do you take the position that now that we've seen that things can change, we might be able to actually start to decarbonize, or are you a pessimist about that based on what you've learned over the course of your career so far?
I would like to think I'm an optimist, but, I think it's easy to get pessimistic, especially when, we all thought that in 2006, for example, just seemed like this sentimental year, when Al Gore came out with his movie, we were all like, oh, Green Revolution. And then I kind of witnessed, the 5 years out from that, people were relatively forgetful and just focusing on economic recovery. And I've seen some art about that, like, oh, we threw away a good opportunity to remake the economy with the 2008 recession and just ended up going back to business as normal.
Right.
So I really hope that we don't get some sort of cognitive bias or hindsight bias or something like that, where we just forget that this whole thing happened and forget that, things could change overnight. And it will be stressful, but there will be some growing pains, but another way of living is totally possible.
We agree. And we hope that we can all pull together.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Lauren, thank you very much for joining us today and talking again with us about the future of sustainability.
Thank you, Mitch, for having me.
Well, folks, check out the article. It is How to Avoid Revenge Pollution While Reviving the Economy by Lauren Olson, and she is the Net Zero Waste Manager at World Centric. You can find out more about World Centric, which is a really cool company because they give 25% of their profits away to charities around the world to help create sustainability. It's at worldcentric.com. I urge you to check it out, and if you're looking for restaurant supplies for your reopening restaurant, take a look at their delivery items because I think that's the future of your business, folks. Sorry. And this is Earth911. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. We will be back with another interview on sustainability in your ears soon. Have a great day, folks, and be well.